In today's video, the left is scrambling for their next move after the redistricting plan failed miserably. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Hakeem, Jeffries, and Democrats are now desperate to come up with a plan after their brutal loss and the redistricting battle in Virginia. And now, instead of accepting the outcome, they want to dismantle our judicial system and rewrite the rules of our elections. And so now the left is more desperate now than ever. And at this point, they're not even trying to hide their true intentions. As always, if you do enjoy the content, smash that thumbs up button. That's the best way you can let me know. Subscribe to stay locked in with all the future videos. And so first, let's start with Hakeem Jeffries coping hard with the Virginia redistricting loss and now threatening for nationwide electoral reform if Democrats regain power ever again. Take a listen.
The polling indicates the likelihood that Democrats will take the House in November. History suggests the likelihood that that'll happen. Are you a little worried that this nutty, out of control gerrymandering actually compromises that possibility?
No, we're going to win back the House of Representatives in November. We are only 3 seats short. We historically overperformed in November. And that's one of the reasons why Republicans are in panic mode. Remember, Ali, when we took the House back in 2018, we were 24 seats short. We crossed over that hurdle, and in fact, in 2018, we flipped a total of 40 seats. So we're going to take back control of the House of Representatives. We're going to continue to make clear to the American people that we will lower their high cost of living, fix a broken health care system, and clean up the corruption that we're seeing in the country, in the Congress, certainly with the Supreme Court, and deal with the most corrupt administration in American history. Now, we're going to need nationwide judicial reform. We're going to need nationwide electoral reform. We're going to need nationwide campaign finance reform, which is why we have to take the House back, take the Senate back, keep pressing forward, and then in 2028, take the presidency back as well.
This is exactly what the left does when the system does not give them the outcome they want. Hakeem Jeffries loses the redistricting fight in Virginia, and immediately the answer becomes nationwide electoral reform, nationwide campaign finance reform. Translation, the left lost under the current rules, and so now they need to rewrite the rules. And that's the part that people need to understand. This had nothing to do with democracy. Democrats were trying to redraw maps in Virginia in a way that could have helped them regain more congressional seats. But the court stepped in and said the tactics that you tried to use, that's the problem. And suddenly the entire system, now it needs to be changed. That's not defending democracy. That's the left saying, give us power so we can redesign the system in our favor. And Jeffries basically said the quiet part out loud. He's telling you the left needs the House, the Senate, and the presidency so they can go after the courts, change election rules, and rewrite campaign finance laws. And now here's Hakeem Jeffries claiming that this is Jim Crow 2.0. And of course, because the left lost the redistricting fight, now here comes the next move. Turn it into a civil rights crisis.
That for a second, because if you and I are from New York, we don't live, there's not a daily lived experience of Reconstruction and the end of it and Jim Crow laws. In the South, there still is. Like, people have either in recent memory or they still experience things like that. This is being described as like the end of Reconstruction. It's that serious. It took decades, 7 decades to get out of that mess and get back to 1965. How do you get people in New York and California and Minneapolis and places like that to think about the fact that this is everybody's fight right now? This isn't just black people's fight.
It's certainly everybody's fight. Listen, Dr. King once eloquently made the observation that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that's the reality of what we confront right now. So it is everybody's fight to show up and stand up and speak up. Now, the American journey has always been characterized by moments of progress, followed by moments of backlash, and then a new generation of Americans have to show up, stand up, speak up, fight, get into good trouble to usher in an era of progress. We went from the progress of emancipation to the backlash of Jim Crow, the progress of the civil rights movement to the backlash of mass incarceration, the progress of electing Barack Obama to the backlash that has resulted in the elevation of Donald Trump, MAGA extremism, and this behavior that we're seeing coming out of the Supreme Court of the United States to throw the American South back into the Jim Crow era. So it's going to take an all-hands-on-deck effort, and everybody has a stake in preserving a multiracial democracy as part of the effort to preserve American exceptionalism as we move forward into our next 250 years.
This is the problem with the way the left uses language. Jim Crow, racism, this, voter suppression, that, but only when they lose power. Because notice how they talk about, you heard Hakeem Jeffries, multiracial democracy. But what he really means is democracy where minorities vote Democrat, elect Democrats, and keep the left in control. Because if a black candidate is Republican, suddenly that does not count. I mean, right now in Memphis, Republicans have been pointing to Charlotte Bergman, a black Republican woman, as someone who could potentially win that district that's up for grabs now and benefit from the new Tennessee map. Meanwhile, though, you got Democrats and civil rights groups who are challenging that map and arguing it dismantles a majority black Democratic district centered in Memphis. And so, let me get this straight. A majority black district can be represented by a white Democrat. That is black representation. But if a black woman who happens to be a Republican is elected, suddenly Democrats call it Jim Crow 2.0. That tells you everything you need to know right there. Because for the left, multiracial democracy does not mean multiracial representation. It means multiracial obedience to the Democrat Party. They do not want black voters represented. They want black voters represented by Democrats. And that brings us to CNN, because Hakeem Jeffries is not the only one pushing this meltdown narrative. Now, Abby Phillips is jumping in, doing what the media does every time the left loses. Exaggerates the stakes, cries democracy is under attack, and turns a political defeat into a civil rights crisis. Take a listen.
So we are, to be frank, in the depths of hell now when it comes to redistricting. I don't think there's a better way to put it. Like, there's no bottom officially here. I think between the Supreme Court ruling and Virginia, we have a situation where pretty much every state is going to be looking at their maps and seeing whether they can box out the other political party. And the result is going to be, I think, just terrible, chaos. Probably. Yeah, chaos, terrible for our democracy. But for black voters in particular in the South, they're looking to lose pretty much most, if not all, of their representation in southern states.
So Abby Phillips, she starts by saying we are in the depths of hell, which is clearly dramatic exaggeration meant to frighten, scare the viewers, people watching this. But then she takes it a step further and claims black representation in Congress will dwindle to literally nothing. I mean, talk about hyperbole. The left wants you to believe that black representation disappears unless they draw majority black districts that protect safe Democrat seats. But look at Congress right now. Most black members are not representing majority black districts. Look it up. They're winning in diverse districts, majority white districts, non-majority black districts, ladies and gentlemen. And so the issue is not whether black candidates can win. The issue is the left is afraid they might lose seats they believe belong to them. And honestly, the most insulting part about this entire argument is the idea that black Americans only have a political voice if they are packed into one specially drawn district. Black voters could influence multiple districts. They could force candidates across the map to compete for their vote. But they don't. Unfortunately, the black community overwhelmingly votes blue no matter who. And that's a black community, black culture problem, not a civil rights issue that the left wants to cry about. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's shift gears to New York, because this same political fantasy is playing out with Zohran Mamdani and his tax the rich agenda. And so let's go to CNN's Michael Smerconish, because Mamdani keeps selling this idea that you can promise more programs, more spending, and more free services by simply making the rich and businesses pay for it. But Smerconish laid out the brutal truth. Eventually, the math has to work. So check it out.
By now, you've probably seen what New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani did on tax day. Griffin wasn't amused. He called it a personal attack and a profound lack of judgment, and then he did something about it. More jobs going to Miami, a planned $6 billion Park Avenue development with thousands of jobs attached, now in doubt. And then another big name weighed in. Vornado Realty Chair Steve Roth said the phrase, tax the rich, when spit out with anger and contempt by politicians, is just as hateful as certain racial slurs. He even put it on the same level as the pro-Palestinian phrase, from the river to the sea. Strong words, probably too strong of an equivalence, but I'm not sure that he's entirely wrong. Look, tax the rich is probably more policy position than slur. When Mamdani says the city's $5 billion budget gap means wealthy New Yorkers need to pay more, that's a debate worth having, fine. But filming yourself outside one specific man's home to use his address as a campaign prop, that's not policy, that smacks more of a shakedown. And Griffin himself seems to think it's something worse, stating the video put me in harm's way, noting that CEO Brian Thompson, allegedly shot by Luigi Mangione, was killed only blocks away from Griffin's New York address. But Mamdani is hardly the only modern politician who makes it personal. Lest we forget, a few years back, AOC showed up at the Met Gala in a dress that also said tax the rich. Sometime before then, she helped force Amazon and 25,000 jobs out of New York City.
And let's be clear, this is not about defending billionaires. I'm not trying to defend a billionaire here. They can defend themselves, obviously. This is a little trick the left likes to use. They frame the argument as, oh, so you just want to protect the rich. No. The real issue is what tax the rich eventually becomes, what it really means. Because we already know how this story ends. First, they tell you they are only going after millionaires, billionaires, corporations, and the wealthy. Then the programs get bigger. The spending gets bigger. The budget gap gets larger. And eventually, who gets stuck with the bill? The middle class, ladies and gentlemen. Homeowners, small business owners, working families, the people who cannot just pack up and move their money overnight. I mean, look at Brandon Johnson's Chicago right now. Ask the people watching their property tax bill go up massively while politicians continue pretending they're only going after the rich. And here's the part that makes it even worse, ladies and gentlemen. The left wants you to trust them with more taxpayer money while they are already poorly managing the money they have now. I mean, make that make sense. They have huge budget deficits, reckless spending, bloated programs, failed promises, and useless government projects that do not fix the problem they were supposed to fix. Then after mismanaging the budget, they turn around and say, you know what? You know what we need? More money. I mean, give me a break.
Elon Musk has deserved every single penny of the money he's made. Jeff Bezos,
absolutely not.
They have
that
a large,
is the most ludicrous statement you have ever made. They are making money off the American taxpayer, off the American government, after deals with SpaceX.
Bigger.
I don't know why you're shilling for these people. It's nuts.
It has made our standard of living, because capitalism has a moral argument that needs to be defended. It has made our standard of living better than any other group of people in any other time. And I would say, I want
standard of living, Lydia?
Elon Musk,
Whose standard of living?
A trillionaire, because guess what? Okay. With his money, he's literally letting blind people see. He's letting paralyzed people walk. I want him to have the money, not Elizabeth Warren, who's going to funnel it to fraud.
He's letting blind people see and paralyzed people walk. What are we doing?
Have you heard of Neuralink?
Have I heard of Neuralink? Does it work, babe?
Lydia's point about...
And this is the problem with the progressive mindset. They believe they get to decide what's valuable, what's moral, who earned their money, and who needs to be punished for succeeding. And so when you bring up an Elon Musk, a Jeff Bezos, or anybody who built massive companies, created products people use, employed thousands and generated real economic value, none of that matters, because to them, the money was made in an immoral way. But who are they to decide that? If people voluntarily buy the product, use the service, work for the company, receive a paycheck, invest in it, that's not theft. That's value creation. But the left, they treat wealth as suspicious by default. And once they are able to convince people success is immoral, they can then justify taking more of it in the name of fairness. Now let's move to Los Angeles, because this same progressive mindset is colliding, ladies and gentlemen, with reality in another deep blue city. I'm talking about Los Angeles. And so out there you got, Spencer Pratt is now being talked about in the Los Angeles mayor's race. And the reason it's getting so much attention is simple, because he's talking about crime, homelessness, high taxes, and how politicians keep on failing upward. And so now back on CNN, you got Lydia Moynihan. She's praising Pratt for making basic common sense points at the latest debate. And somehow that was enough to trigger the progressive on the panel into a full meltdown. Take a listen.
Odds are going up. We'll see. This is a really uphill battle for him, but I think Republicans should be taking copious notes because he's literally, you just got to embrace common sense and be normal. And he is calling out the fact that leftists in LA seem to be fine with letting people, shoot up in front of schools. They're fine with dogs getting injected with fentanyl. They're doing nothing. And he's calling out some very obvious things that the vast majority of Americans can agree on. And he's going viral because of it. People want common sense.
Is this common sense for real? Like, as an LA voter, as someone that will vote for mayor in Los Angeles, I'm telling you, this is the opposite of common sense. This is so embarrassing. I am so exhausted of being surrounded by this level of idiocy. It is not. This guy is not practical. His man's plan was to live off his reality fame. When that dwindled, he wanted to be an influencer. When that dwindled, he tried to make his wife a singer. It didn't work, so now he's going to be mayor of LA. He says he's going to end corruption. How? He says he's going to have no more homeless. How? He says he's going to have renters' rights. How? I'm so sick of having politicians come in here with zero experience telling us they're going to fix everything. Have we learned nothing?
Let me just play
it's embarrassing.
what his retort to you would be.
You really can't take people like her seriously, because clearly, she's so far gone that anything outside of her delusional woke bubble just does not compute. She tries to come off like she knows so much more than everyone else, but honestly, it just ends up looking really, really, really bad. And this is exactly why Spencer Pratt is getting so much attention in the first place right now. Because when you put common sense next to progressive talking points, those talking points start falling apart really fast. And so let's jump into this clip with Nithya Raman, who is also running for mayor in LA, a far left politician, Mom Donnie West Coast wannabe who wants to defund the police. But now suddenly she wants to sound more balanced, more logical, and more reasonable about public safety after Spencer Pratt basically destroyed her and Karen Bass in the most recent debate. Take a listen to this.
I want to have an honest conversation about public safety. I want to make sure we're paying our city workforce well. I want to make sure we're maintaining our police force and expanding other kinds of responses to calls for help from people. But we can't do any of that if we are making political decisions about the city's budget instead of real decisions that will deliver real services for people.
So you no longer believe in defunding the police?
No.
And what caused you to change your mind?
I think we need to be able to ensure that the city can respond to calls for service, and we have to make sure that we are able to respond to calls for help around public safety issues. And I think in order to do that at this moment, with our response system, we need to be able to maintain the size of our police force.
And so what we're seeing from the left is this constant idea that they know what's best for everybody. And then when they're wrong, when the policies fail and when the city gets worse, money runs out, crime gets out of control, that thing, businesses start leaving and you got boarded up commercial properties. Suddenly they want to switch up the language and act like nothing ever happened, right? Like they still got all the answers. But the damage is already done. And then instead of taking responsibility, no, now they need a villain. And so they tell you the problem is the rich. And they can't say it's a Republican problem because in the case of Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, these are also Democrat blue states. So they tell you the problem is the rich. The problem is the successful. The problem is the people who built companies, created jobs, and made money. Woo, they're the boogeyman. No. The problem is the failed policies that drive up costs, chase away businesses, punish taxpayers, and make normal people live harder. And that's the part they never want to admit. Because if they ever realize the problem is not the billionaires across the country, but the politicians running their own cities into the ground, then the whole scam falls apart. But those are my thoughts on the update. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment down below. I appreciate when you guys chime in. Smash that thumbs up if you enjoy the content. Subscribe for more. And as always, until next time.